Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Mark Ellison had always been a quiet man. He didn't like drawing attention, and that included his feelings. He was the kind of person who believed love was shown more through actions than words. He spent hours in his office buried in spreadsheets, using that as an excuse for his constant absence at home. He said he worked so hard to give Vanessa the best life possible, but the truth was, behind the busy routine, there was a tired man trying to hold up something that had long shown signs of wear. His marriage had become a silent agreement. He took care of stability, she handled the image of a happy couple. Vanessa, on the other hand, was everything Mark couldn't be. Talkative, elegant, always surrounded by people, with a natural charm that lit up any room she walked into. Wherever she went, all eyes turned to her. And she seemed to enjoy it. At first, he found it charming. He thought it was cute how she talked to people, how easily she smiled. But over time, that charm started to bother him. Mark had seen looks that lasted too long, hugs that lingered too much, jokes that seemed to go too far. But he pretended not to notice. He preferred to believe it was just jealousy, silly stuff from his imagination. But that excuse became harder to maintain. Everything changed at the end-of-year party at Vanessa's company. She invited him in a rush, almost as if expecting him to decline. But that year, he decided to go. He wanted to spend more time with her, even if it was among co-workers he barely knew. When they arrived, he felt out of place right away. Vanessa disappeared into the crowd shortly after walking in, as if she were the hostess and he was just another stranger. He got himself a drink and stood in a corner, watching. That's when he noticed the odd behavior between her and Travis Morgan, one of her co-workers. He'd never heard that name until that moment. But seeing them together for 5 minutes was enough for him to realize there was a connection that crossed professional boundaries. They exchanged smiles that said more than any conversation. Travis lightly touched her arm while talking, and she responded with gestures that felt way too familiar. Once, when they approached the bar, Vanessa turned and pretended to look for Mark, but looked straight past him like he wasn't even there. Travis, on the other hand, shot a direct glance at Mark, like someone recognizing an obstacle in his path. There was something about Travis' attitude that really bothered Mark, a sense of confidence that overflowed. What disturbed him most was the certainty that this man knew Vanessa chose him every day, even though she was married. The coolness with which they acted, even aware of Mark's presence, triggered something inside him that had been flickering for a long time, but now screamed loudly. For the rest of the night, Mark discreetly watched the two. When Vanessa sat at a table with others, Travis somehow managed to get close. When she went to the bathroom, he followed shortly after and came back minutes later, laughing to himself. Mark considered confronting her right there, but something held him back. Maybe pride. Or maybe the desire not to lower himself in front of everyone. So he stayed quiet, faking a smile for anyone who greeted him, while deep down his chest felt heavy. On the drive back home, the silence between them was almost tangible. Vanessa kept messing with her phone and letting out short laughs. Mark asked if she had fun. She said yes, that it was a great night, and quickly changed the subject. He felt his stomach twist. That night, lying next to her, staring at the ceiling, Mark realized this wasn't about suspicion anymore. Doubt had been swallowed by instinct. Something inside him had broken. He looked to his side and saw Vanessa sleeping like everything was perfectly fine. That peaceful image filled him with silent anger. It felt like he was the intruder in his own life. Like at some point, they had switched places and he was now just a spectator in a theater where his presence no longer mattered. That's when he made a decision. For the first time, he would pursue the truth directly. No assumptions, no idealizations. He wanted facts. And he prepared himself for whatever he might find. Because deep down, he already knew there was no turning back. Mark woke up different that morning. The kind of different that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul. Something had changed inside him, like a quiet part of him that had always waited for explanations had finally given up. The image of Vanessa and Travis at the party remained vivid in his mind. Those gestures she would swear were harmless, the disguised touches, exaggerated smiles, long glances, everything now seemed like an insult to his intelligence. He didn't want to feed doubts anymore. It was time to act with precision, control, and clarity. He got out of bed, dressed calmly, and before even having breakfast, made the call he had planned since the middle of the night. He reached out to Carl Benson. Carl was a well-known name among discreet businessmen. A former cop, he investigated carefully and effectively. Mark spoke firmly on the phone, asked for a quick meeting, and explained the basics. They scheduled a meeting for the evening, and when they met, the conversation was sharp and direct. Mark handed over photos of Vanessa, her usual schedule, names of co-workers, and places she often visited alone. He made it clear he didn't want speculation. He wanted images, times, concrete proof. Carl, experienced as he was, only asked one question before ending the conversation: "Are you ready to see what will completely destroy what's left between you two?" Mark simply answered yes. Because deep down, he already knew what was coming. The following days were long. Vanessa continued smiling, having secret phone calls, exchanging messages in the middle of the night, and making last-minute excuses like corporate events. Mark watched everything without showing any reaction. The more she lied, the more certain he became of what needed to be done. He started sleeping less. Every time she left, his mind raced with theories, none of them innocent. On a Friday around 8 p.m., Vanessa said she had a meeting with the marketing team and might take a while to come back. Mark simply wished her luck and pretended to be distracted with his phone. She left cheerfully, smelling nice, without any apparent guilt. 3 days later, Carl showed up with the evidence. They arranged to meet somewhere off downtown. Mark arrived first, ordered coffee, and waited in silence. When Carl sat down, he carefully opened the folder and slid the photos one by one. Mark didn't need explanations. The images spoke for themselves. Vanessa getting into Travis's car. The two of them dining at a discreet restaurant, holding hands. Clandestine laughter, intimate touches, a closeness impossible to justify as friendship. Then, her entering a hotel with him. The same hotel every time. Mark stared at each image without looking away. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just absorbed it all. In the end, he put the evidence into a clean envelope, stood up, and thanked Carl with a handshake. This was the end of doubt. And confirmation of what he had known for far too long. When he got home, Vanessa was on the couch, her laptop resting on her legs. She smiled as if nothing was wrong. He responded with a nod and went upstairs. There, he prepared the envelope, placed all the evidence inside, and walked downstairs. He laid the envelope on the kitchen table and said calmly, "We need to talk." She looked at him, puzzled. When she saw the envelope, she frowned and slowly opened it. The photos spilled onto the table, one after another. For a second, Vanessa froze. Then she picked up one of the pictures, looked at her own face smiling next to Travis, and dropped it back on the table with force. She tried to explain herself, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that he had emotionally drifted away, that everything happened too fast. Mark just stared at her silently. He had already heard similar excuses from other people. Now it was her turn. She moved closer, tried to take his hand, but he pulled back. He simply said, "I've already filed for divorce today. The paperwork should arrive soon." Vanessa widened her eyes. For the first time, panic began to show on her face. She asked if there was any chance of fixing things, if they could talk calmly. He repeated the same sentence, firm, without anger or obvious sadness. "You already made the choice for me." She went upstairs, nervous, probably to call someone or maybe to cry. Mark stayed still, like everything had finally settled. The empty envelope on the table seemed to symbolize what remained of their marriage, memories that, even though real, no longer held any value. The divorce was finalized 2 months after the night Vanessa left the house with a small suitcase and no explanation. Mark showed up at the courthouse without making a scene. He had the documents ready, signed, and his gaze steady. Vanessa arrived a few minutes later, accompanied by a lawyer who talked more than she did. The two exchanged brief nods, avoided any conversation, and signed the papers as if closing a business deal. There were no tears, no drama, no final pleas. When the clerk stamped the last form and pushed the final copies toward them, Vanessa gave a bureaucratic thank you, gathered her papers, and walked out without looking back. Mark remained seated for a few seconds, took a deep breath, stood up, and left. That was the official end. And the beginning of a deeper silence than he expected. The months that followed were tough. Although he was sure about his decision, Mark carried within him the weight of abandonment, humiliation, and shattered trust. He tried to move forward by throwing himself into work. He accepted new projects, doubled his number of meetings, and started running every morning again, a habit he had abandoned during the last years of the marriage. He avoided places he used to frequent with Vanessa. Even avoided songs. Routine became a form of anesthesia. Some close friends praised him for his strong posture, for the maturity with which he handled everything. But what no one saw was what happened at the end of the day, when he took off his shoes and stared at the dark ceiling of his bedroom, questioning how someone who shared so many years of his life could destroy him so coldly. One night, when he got home from work, Mark received a message from Dean, his wedding best man. "Have you seen this yet?" the text read, along with a link to a post. His heart tightened before even opening it. When he clicked, it led directly to a mutual friend's profile. There was a series of photos in a decorated garden, with balloons, flowers, smiling guests, and a caption that hit like a punch, celebrating the sweetest engagement of the year. "Congratulations, Vanessa and Travis." Mark stared at the screen for a few seconds as if it were a hallucination. He scrolled through the photos one by one. There she was, wearing a light dress and the same smile he knew so well. And beside her, Travis Morgan, the man who destroyed his marriage. With one hand on Vanessa's waist and the other holding a champagne glass. The last photo showed their engagement rings, followed by enthusiastic comments from friends, heart emojis, and promises of happily ever after. Mark dropped his phone on the table and stayed motionless. It didn't hurt like before. It was different. There was no longer love or longing. What rose inside him was something else. A silent outrage. How could someone cause so much damage in another person's life and then show off like they were the star of a romantic comedy? It was as if Vanessa wanted to erase everything they lived through, as if their 6-year marriage had been just a rehearsal until she found someone better. Travis, with his confident boyish smile, seemed to be displaying the trophy he stole from another man. And that stirred something in Mark he hadn't expected. For the first time, he felt the urge to act. Not out of spite. Not to win her back. But to make it clear that not every story ends with cheaters living happily while others swallow their pain in silence. The next morning, Mark went for a run like he did every Tuesday, but this time his steps were firmer, his focus sharper. Each meter covered seemed to prepare his mind for what was about to come. While the city woke up around him, he began thinking through details, names, possibilities. He started mentally mapping things out like he was building a professional project. That's what he was good at, planning. If Vanessa thought the past could be buried with a wedding party and well-edited photos, she was about to learn a lesson she'd never forget. Because Mark wasn't the type to strike impulsively. He was the type who waited for the perfect moment. And the perfect moment was coming. Mark spent days thinking through the details. He didn't want theatrical revenge, the kind that turns into neighborhood gossip. What he wanted was something subtle, precise, done with the same coldness with which he had been betrayed. After seeing Vanessa and Travis publicly celebrating their engagement like nothing had happened, like they jumped straight from infidelity to the altar, something inside him shifted. It wasn't uncontrolled anger. It was calculated indignation. He wanted Vanessa to discover, firsthand, who the man she was about to marry truly was. Travis had destroyed Mark's marriage and seemed to have learned nothing from it. Worse than that, he acted like he deserved a reward. And that was exactly what Mark wanted to dismantle. He remembered Kendra Monroe, a woman he met years ago at a business event. She was an upscale escort, but what stood out most about Kendra was her emotional intelligence. She knew how to enter and exit situations with class. She listened more than she talked. She was beautiful, but also strategic. Mark contacted her via message. He told her only the essentials. He needed her to get close to a specific man, Travis Morgan, and test just how loyal he was to the relationship he proudly displayed. Kendra listened patiently and, at the end, accepted the challenge without hesitation. Men like that always fall. They just need a little push. On the first Thursday night, Kendra went to the bar where Travis usually hung out with his friends. It was an informal spot frequented by young entrepreneurs and rising professionals. She sat alone at the counter, ordered a drink, and pretended to be waiting for someone. Travis noticed her within the first few minutes. He exchanged glances with one of his friends and then approached. He struck up a conversation with a generic excuse, asking if she came here often. Kendra smiled warmly, feigned surprise at the approach, and said she was in town for work, evaluating potential properties for investment. He immediately became interested. And stayed around until the end of the night. When she got up to leave, Travis walked her to the door and asked for her phone number. She gave it to him. At the second meeting, the masks came off faster. Travis suggested a more private location, and Kendra accepted. She pretended to be captivated by his conversation, his compliments, his charm as a successful executive. During dinner, Travis started making comments about how relationships are complicated, and how sometimes people need moments just for themselves. When Kendra discreetly asked if he was in a relationship, he hesitated for a second and replied, "I'm engaged, but nobody needs to know that tonight." She pretended to be surprised, smiled with a mix of seduction and disdain, and said, "Well, then pretend you're single." Minutes later, he leaned across the table and kissed her. Kendra's phone, hidden in her purse in recording mode, captured the entire kiss. And his final line, whispered with a smirk, sealed everything: "My fiancé has no idea I still know how to have fun." The next morning, Mark received the video on his phone. Along with it came a short message from Kendra: "He bit the bait faster than I imagined." Mark watched the video from start to finish with a neutral expression. Not a word escaped his lips. Then, methodically, he saved the video, took screenshots, printed each one, and organized them chronologically. He created a brown envelope, without a sender, only writing "Vanessa Ellison" by hand on the front. He hired a discreet delivery rider to drop it off at her current address. He requested the package be delivered directly into her hands or, if she wasn't available, placed in her mailbox with urgency. And after that, he did nothing else. He just waited. Hours after the delivery, Mark saw Vanessa's name flashing on his phone screen. He ignored the first call. Ignored the second. On the third, he answered. She was crying uncontrollably. Her voice trembled, mixed with anger and confusion. She asked how he had the courage to do that. She accused, stuttered, begged for answers. Mark remained silent for long seconds before responding, "You gave your life to someone who already cheated on you with another woman. I just thought it was fair to show you who he still is." She tried to argue, but Mark ended the call with a short phrase, "This time, you saw it with your own eyes." And he hung up. He hung up without weight. Without excitement. Without a taste of victory. It was simply the conclusion of something that needed to be done. A silent warning, a response without shouting. Mark never wanted to destroy Vanessa. He only wanted her to understand, in a real and undeniable way, what he felt when he was betrayed. Now, it was her turn to live the impact of a truth that could no longer be undone. And Travis, well, Travis simply revealed who he had always been. The news hit like a bomb. At first, Vanessa disappeared from social media for a few days. After receiving the envelope with the proof in her hands, she was certain of two things: Travis was exactly what Mark had tried to show her all along, and she had been completely wrong about him. At first, she tried to keep up appearances. She told her closest friends it was just a need for space, that the engagement had been postponed for personal reasons. But the video started spreading. Someone, likely one of Mark's friends who heard the story, shared the content. It only took a few messages passed around private groups for the humiliation to spread like wildfire. Vanessa realized she couldn't control the narrative anymore. And so she made an unexpected decision. Late Sunday night, she posted a long message on her social media. She was direct, not hiding any names. She admitted she had destroyed a marriage by getting involved with Travis, believing she was experiencing something real. She confessed she had been betrayed by the same man just months later. And that she deserved every consequence of what she was going through. The post went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, some supporting her bravery, others reminding her that Mark's suffering came long before hers. Travis, on the other hand, became the joke among acquaintances and colleagues at his company. The situation reached management. Travis worked as a senior account manager at a financial consultancy, a role requiring professionalism, discretion, and above all, trust. He was called into an emergency meeting. Sitting in front of the executives, he tried to defend himself by calling it personal matters, unrelated to his job. But the response was harsh and direct. "If you can't maintain trust within your own household, how can we expect you to uphold it with our clients who entrust you with millions?" said the vice president. The atmosphere in the room turned icy. Minutes later, Travis was terminated. No farewell speech. No goodbye party. Meanwhile, Mark followed everything from a distance. He didn't comment, like, or share anything. He continued with his routine, work, and the new life he built far from all of it. Sometimes, he received messages from people witnessing what was happening, wanting to hear his opinion. He responded with silence. Anything that needed to be said had already been proven through action. Vanessa tried to reach out again weeks later. She sent long messages apologizing once more. She said she now understood everything, that she regretted it deeply, that she thought often about what they had together. She suggested meetings, tried calling, even showed up once at his office, stopped at the front desk. Mark remained firm. He looked back only with the certainty that he had made the right decisions. He understood that some people only learn when they lose. And others, like him, are reborn when they stop clinging to those who clearly never stood by them. There was no revenge. There was justice. Silent, precise, clean. And now, the silence that once hurt him had transformed into peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.